What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Only Football Podcast. Today we're doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be introducing you to a Patriot fan. That's right. I'm going to be interviewing him. It's going to be cool. It's going to be casual. Ginger's already in the chat. Stay tuned. There we go. What's going on? Welcome to the Only Football Podcast. We got, wow, my phone ringing already. It's Adam Schefter status right now. We got Rusty with us. Rusty, first off, nice to meet you and thank you for being on this podcast. I'm really excited to get to know you and ask you some questions. So you're a Patriots fan, is that right?
That's right, Kyle. Absolute honor and a pleasure coming over, staying within the Star 6 Media family. Some might know me from the Slot Shot podcast, a hockey podcast, and very honored to join you from Radio Row. I can see this week for Super Bowl coverage. So excited to be here. Don't mind the Brett Favre 91 draft tee. I got my Patriots Snow Bowl commemorative up there inside the home office. So yeah, I'm a classic. You'll learn that. You'll learn that.
Yeah, I found that the best spot to get like classic one of a kind stuff is eBay. I'm a big eBay guy when it comes to my football merch. Actually, this hat I'm wearing right now is from the Packers Broncos Super Bowl.
Oh, no shit. Well, that was a good one.
Some lady had it in her garage and it was her grandpa's and she sold to me for like $3.
A lot of Hall of Famers in that game. That was a good game.
Yeah, one of the greats. So let's talk in the beginning. So I always ask this to every fan that I meet, no matter what sport it is, because I know I have kind of a unique story. I was born in Wisconsin, and when you tell people you're a Packer fan, oh yeah, we're gonna pack a lit together in the spirit of football. Like me and Rusty just met. And we were backstage before we went live, and he's like, "I'm gonna throw a lip in." And I'm like, "You know what, Rusty? I'm gonna throw in one too." So
honestly, I'm skipping dinner right now, and I'm overdue. So it's gonna be a little grizzly wintergreen for dinner tonight.
Little nicotine to suppress the appetite, right? So, like I was saying, being raised in Wisconsin, it's like voodoo to not be a Packer fan. And I'm a Broncos fan. So people always ask me, like, how did that happen? Most people assume it's because of Peyton Manning. It's not. But we're not going to talk about my story. How did you become a Patriots fan?
Fair question, right? I grew up in Newton, Massachusetts, about 7 miles west of Boston. I grew up, my dad's definitely a big sports fan, but skews much more towards hockey. I'm the first person in my family to play organized football, and I just loved it. Like as like about a 5 or 6 year old, I just said, "Dad, I want to play football." He grabbed the ball to go chuck it in the backyard. I said, "No, I want to play real football." And God bless him, and God bless my parents for supporting it. But they got me into Pop Warner, the next August, and it was really kind of a love affair with the sport ever since. So I played from the earliest year I was able to start Pop Warner, aged about 6, all the way through the end of high school when they realized, a slow, fat Jew is not a great college football middle linebacker. So,
yeah, now that you mention it, I don't think I know any slow, fat Jews in the NFL. So, how old were you about when you started your Pop Warner? Because I remember when I was starting Pop Warner, there was leagues. It was forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Tiny Mite, Mighty Mite, Junior Pee Wee, Junior Midget.
So it varies depending on like what state and what program you're in. For me in Massachusetts, we had like A squad, B squad, C squad, D squad, E squad.
Okay.
Working backwards from like 13, basically, like right up until high school. And it was all based on weight limits. So E squad was, yeah, again, I think everybody in E squad was maybe 7 years old. I think I was 6 years old based on my birthday, like a late summer birthday. But I've been playing August, or I played football from age 6 to 17.
Yeah, I was it was like you had to be 70 pounds to play Pee Wee, and all my friends were in the Pee Wee league, and I had to do junior Pee Wee because I was like 69 pounds, which is a good number, right, to land on, but not good to play with your friends. So I was kind of humiliated. I had to go play with all the kids a grade lower. But man, those are good times. Those are
Dude,
good times.
flip side. I was fighting the option to play higher because I was a fat little fuck coming off of
And you were just learning too.
summer vacation and everything. And I used to have to cut weight like a wrestler, like as a 6, 7, 8, 9 year old. I'd be running laps in a trash bag before the weigh-in, before the season starts, eating nothing but carrots and Jello for days before the weigh-ins to get underweight. So, I was
It's
one of
like
the shorter
UFC.
guys. Yeah, I was one of the shorter guys on the team, but always right up against the weight limit. Things have slightly changed, but not all that much since. But yeah, that was my introduction to really being a diehard football fan. We'll get into kind of the Patriots, the fanhood, becoming fluent in NFL football and understanding how things go, which obviously evolved. But yeah, it's been a love affair since I was that old, and that was right around the time of the Packers Patriots Super Bowl, ironically enough, with the Brett Favre tee on. So
Yeah, that is pretty ironic. So, do you care to explain that really quick? How you became a Pats fan? You
no,
don't
it's
have
just
to.
no, it's just hometown team. So it's not that it's not that glorious.
Hometown team. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, hometown team. When you were playing Pee Wee, who is the quarterback? Was it Drew Bledsoe?
Correct.
Okay, so that kind of leads me to my second question, which I put Tomboy because you were a boy still when Tom Brady took over. Um, do your earliest memories of Tom Brady? Did you know that he was going to be as great as he was when you were watching him? Maybe his first, second year, you were like, we got a good one," or was it like he won his fourth Super Bowl and you're like, okay, this guy's different? Like, when did you know Tom Brady was Tom Brady?
So it's a great question. It's a great question for any Patriots fan, anybody that's being really fair and honest. Coming up, learning football, especially in my household, right? My dad's more of a Bruins fan, but he's also a Boston sports fan in the old sense of the term, right? Before my generation of championships, the fellowship of the miserable, right? That's really what our culture is as a fanhood across all the sports. It just is. And we don't give away our loyalty easily. That's like a key regional like pillar of being a legit New England sports fan. Or at least it was until all these championships started coming in. So having said that, growing up in my house and being myself an offensive lineman, defensive lineman, nose guard, interior lineman early, eventually a linebacker in high school, but I was never much into the pretty boys and the quarterbacks and all of this and that. Um, Bledsoe was the man, and he was like part of that kind of QB culture group of the 90s. He wasn't quite Marino, but there was that kind of quarterbacks club thing, right? I think they had a video game, they had TV shows. It was like the Bledsoe, Marino, Elway, some other guys that kind of sprinkled in there. And Bledsoe was like right on the fringe of that. He was a big deal. He was a really big deal. And so when Brady took over, there were portions of the following that were really quick to just jump on the Brady bandwagon and to love, this adorable heartthrob. All the ladies loved him. Um, so charismatic. To be fair, right? At age 10, I didn't really, I watched all the games and I was so fired up, but I didn't really understand schemes and all these details and nuances to our game, football. But I was slow on the Brady adoption bandwagon, right? Like my favorite player was Richard Seymour on that 2001 team. I was all about the defense, all about just the physicality. Laura Malloy was really my first. Curtis Martin was my first like little kid favorite player. that evolved to Laura Malloy as Curtis became a Jet. And then, Richard Seymour was that first player that I got to do what he did, right? When I watched Laura Malloy, I was purely a spectator. When I watched Richard Seymour, I was like, I want to be like Richard Seymour.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
And so, in hindsight, and I go back and I watch a lot of the old games on YouTube, especially because the Patriots suck now. But I watched all these old games on YouTube, and there's some delineation points when Brady started to really prove himself as a legit player, right? And that is separate from my own appreciation for him. And so I don't think I was really Tom Brady's the man, our man, like the absolute legend. I don't think until really the end of the 3 out of 4 early, and even closer to after they won that 4th Super Bowl. He was really the best player on the team starting, I think, at the 3rd Super Bowl team. I think that was when he was really standing out as the straw that stirs the drink.
Yeah.
But they were still a power running team. They were still really strong in all areas of the rest of the game. And I always thought of him as kind of a complementary piece. So, like, when you look at even that first run to the championship, in that AFC championship game, Jason Gilden came down on Brady's ankle and he had to leave the game. And a lot of people forget Drew Bledsoe actually threw the game-winning touchdown to send them to the Super Bowl. So even in that year, there was debate about was it going to be Drew or was it going to be Tom? And I wasn't really diehard in either direction. I was probably more of a Drew guy, to be honest with you. Obviously, he had that great drive at the end of the game to bring the championship home that became really his calling card. But I don't think I was on the Brady bandwagon until late 04, maybe even 05 or 06, when he was really the guy. We were running a spread offense and everything went through him.
Yeah, I kind of appreciate the honesty, because there's probably a lot of people that would be like, with a guy like Tom, like, yeah, I always knew Tom Brady. And you mentioned some of actually really quick, I just want to hit some of these comments. Jinja, Jinja's a Colts fan. He said, man, I really dislike the Patriots for obvious reasons, but I'll give him a shot. And then he goes, what's up, Rusty? Looks like Rusty's been blazing or burning cigs. My kind of guy already. So, Ginger's an awesome dude that's been following this channel really closely. But you mentioned the defense, and I think that's also one of the knocks on Tom Brady. Not a knock, but when you get into the Manning versus Brady debates, a lot of the times it kind of always, well, Tom Brady had a top 10 defense for a lot of those years, and Manning didn't. And the only time Manning did have a top 10 defense, he took his team to Super Bowls. And so it's interesting to hear your perspective as a fan that is like, yeah, Tom Brady, I didn't really know he was, I think you said, the straw stirring the pot. You were focused on the defense, and they did have a really good defense. You had Ty Law, right? Ty Law was a shutdown corner. He was kind of a big guy for a corner. He wasn't like a skinny, lengthy guy. I don't remember him that way. I remember him being kind of big.
Very stout. Ty's about 5'11", but always over 200. In his prime, he was playing at a mean lean, like sort of 200 pounds, physical, but great, like hip fluidity, and ultimately find enough speed to cover even the fastest guys. But he really dominated in a phone booth, right? He dominated jamming at the line of scrimmage, reading the quarterback's eyes. And he was a really, really special. He was great in man-to-man, and I'm not downplaying that at all. But he was really special when they would go into zone coverages and he would rough up the receivers at the line. Jinja Ninja might appreciate, the Colts crying to the league and changing some of the rules there. But, Ty was unbelievable there, jamming people, and he was really great at reading the quarterback's eyes afterwards. That's part of why Jinja Ninja might remember Ty Law caught as many Peyton Manning passes as Marvin Harrison did in one of those AFC championship games.
Off the top ropes. Off the top rope. So, Teddy Bruschi too, though. Was Teddy Bruschi part of that group that you liked in the beginning, or did he come? I can't remember when he was drafted.
Yeah, so Teddy was part of this thing all the way back to that Favre Super Bowl. So Teddy was drafted. He was really an outside edge rusher, if you can believe it, in college when he was at Arizona. Even at his height and size, it sounds crazy today thinking about it, right? A guy that's under 6 feet and not that freak athlete, but he was an edge guy. He came into New England, a really deep linebacking core, and kind of earned his spot and eventually rolled into that Mike linebacker position. But it was always him and Roman Pfeiffer on those 3 Super Bowl teams that were they were calling the plays and quarterbacking the defense and making all the calls for the front seven. And Bruschi was definitely a big part of that, hometown favorite. In hindsight, he's a little bit of like the teacher's pet, like the coach's buddy guy. But absolute legend, a lot of big time plays and big time moments. I definitely love Teddy. If you didn't love Teddy at that time in New England, then you were out to lunch. But I really like the bigger hitters, right? I loved Lawyer. And then when Rodney came and Lawyer left, that was an emotional tear. But as soon as Rodney started playing every week, it was pretty quick for me to appreciate the heavy hitting safety again in that era, that position, right? The John Lynch's, the Laura Malloy, the Rodney Harrison, not Ed Reed, because I think Ed's style of play is a little different.
A little later. Oh, well, just the style.
Well, Ed's a little bit more, right? Ed's most dangerous as that kind of free safety, right? And you don't know where he's going to be, and he's reading the quarterback's eyes at the second level.
Like Palomalu.
Exactly. Palomalu was like the next gen of that, right? So like Laura Malloy and Rodney they're really almost like front seven safeties that played on. There was much a factor in the run game as they were in the pass game. And this was an era where the run game was a lot more influential than the pass compared to today. So right now, if Laura Malloy or Rodney Harrison came into the league through the draft, they'd probably end up playing Mike linebacker the way that offense is today. So, those are the kind of guys that I really gravitated to, and definitely love Teddy, but I was more into the bigger hits, Laura Malloy, Rodney Harrison types.
Yeah. I mean, from what you explain about what you like, I could see why. I mean, it takes a man's man in that time to just from full speed. And I remember watching John Lynch, and he was actually later in his years, but in the 2005 AFC Championship divisional game against the Patriots, I remember watching John Lynch just run straight up and just clock the running back. I forgot who it was. I don't think it was Corey Dillon, maybe. But that physicality, it's just different now. The safeties you see, they're a lot more elusive. I think they probably have better hands. They're a little lengthy. Like we have Justin Simmons, he's like 6'3", but he's not a skinny. Yeah, great player, but totally different style.
It's more like the length, right? You need a Justin Simmons to answer these new dynamic tight end athletes. At this time, your ideal tight end was like a Kyle Brady or like a Daniel Graham or a Frank Wycheck. These guys were sort of tackle tight ends, right? So they were as much a part of the running game as they were the pass. And the evolution of the game, I'd say evolution. I'll just say as years have gone by, the game's changed because I certainly like the older style than the current more so. But it's a great point. It's a great point.
Yeah, the 49ers actually are a pretty good example of that. I was watching the game against, I think it was Seattle, and I'm not a 49ers fan, but probably similar to the Brady love he got, I was on the Brock Purdy train. I just loved the story. I was like last pick, last round, but I digress. George Kittle is a fantastic run blocker.
Iowa Hawkeye, most well-rounded tight end in the game today.
Yeah. I was watching that game and I was like, I mean, even when they were playing, they play with Dallas in the divisional round, Micah Parsons, you would see, even when Kittle was going out, let's say he's running to a flat, he would go and chip Parsons. And then Parsons would get past that, and then he would get past the running back that's blocking and still make a play in the quarterback. And you're like, man, that ball that gets released right as Parsons is hitting him, if Kittle doesn't get a good chip on him off the line, that's a sack. That's a sack. And you just see how good for the 49ers are at running the football. And I feel like George Kittle, he gets a lot of praise, but it's not really sexy. Run blocking is not sexy. So I just feel like it sometimes gets a little overlooked what he does. But let's talk about Belichick. Because obviously Bill Belichick is considered amongst the greatest coaches of all time. You do have people that like to talk about Tom Brady. Was it Bill Belichick? Who the hell's responsible for all the rings? It's a tough thing to say because I feel like they both are responsible for the rings. And I don't like when you have to pick because sometimes both things can be right. It's not one or the other. And the thing I get concerned about, and I'll read you something that Peter King wrote, who is well connected in the NFL. The thing that worries me just as a fan is that Bill Belichick, like you said you weren't using the word evolving, but what the game has turned into, I don't know if Belichick is kind of moving that direction because you saw I mean, they're trying to run the football. They're not really that when you think of offensive guys, and if you saw in the podcast, I've even mentioned it when the playoffs were going into the divisional round, every single coach besides Sean McDermott for McDermott from the Bills, he was the only defensive coach out of everybody remaining. So I do think that it's trending in a way where you want to have an offensive guy just because the offensive position is becoming really important. They're protecting the quarterback. There's more points being scored. You have to have that side of the ball figured out. And Bill Belichick, to me, seems like ever since Brady's left, he really doesn't. And you could say, well, Cam Newton, um, some people say Cam Newton didn't get a fair chance. Some people said he wasn't being used the right way. I didn't even have it in here to ask you about Cam Newton, but I'm just going to ask you before I get into this. What do you make of the Cam Newton 1 year thing? Like, it's hard to evaluate what the Patriots are because every year it's like, what are they doing, man? Like, you got Cam Newton, then you got Mac Jones, and it's like, okay, and then Mac Jones looked good last year, and he's doing the gritty at the Pro Bowl, and you're like, maybe things are going to be okay. And then this year, it's like, okay, we're back to scratching heads. But what do you make of the Cam Newton thing?
Yeah, I mean, it was really it was a roller coaster of emotions, right? The Brady's departure and all of that. We don't need to get into all of it. I'm sure we'll circle back. But as soon as Newton was signed, he was like the last guy left, right? So there was no plan when Brady departed. That's a huge mark on Belichick. It goes all the way back to the Garoppolo stuff and how that kind of how that transpired, and the friction between Belichick and Brady around planning for the quarterback position for the future and how can we bring this success from one quarterback to the next quarterback. And obviously Brady continued to play until he was 45 years old, which I don't think anybody really expected, myself included, certainly. So shame on Belichick for not having a plan at quarterback and pushing Tom out the door like he did, which is a fact. Having said that, in the moment, like the announcement that Newton was coming to the Patriots, it was like at that point, like we had no one on the roster to play the position. So I was stoked that we had Cam Newton coming in only because like what he was going up against in that quarterback room. There was no quarterback room. So as the season, started and got going, there were moments of excitement. You saw bursts of it. And I started to really get behind the idea of us being this kind of power running team that ran Newton a lot, that played good defense, that was well coached, that could really, win in a different style of game, which I was into early. That very quickly was exposed because Newton his mechanics suck. And they couldn't run any bit of the offense that they'd run for the previous, whatever it was, 20 seasons at that point. And it became just an absolute train wreck debacle that was honestly that year got at points was just as bad as this past season of Patriots offensive football. So there's where I'm at with Cam Newton. I don't want to spend necessarily much more time on it.
Yeah, there was it's funny that even came up in the first place because
just to close the book on Newton. I turned on Cam Newton when he fumbled away a game in Buffalo when I forget what it was. It was something like a 4-point deficit, chance to go win the game in Buffalo territory. And it was just a careless possession of the ball fumble that he had as a runner that blew the game, lost that game, and the rest of the season turned into a 500 thing. So that's where I'm at with the Cam Newton moment. I don't want to call it an era because it was really a moment in time.
Yeah, it's like here and gone.
But nobody was more excited than I was to hear that Jones was announced a starter and Newton was released the following August.
Yeah, that felt like the right decision, especially considering how Mac Jones played in the preseason. Like he looked good to me when in the preseason. And you kind of already know who Cam. As far as I'm concerned, and I'll close the chapter on this too. Cam Newton had his career destroyed by one single player in Super Bowl 50, and he was never the same. And you can go
Is it
back and
Vaughn or DeMarcus?
Von Miller, yeah, 2 strip sacks. I mean, he just and that it was really that decision not to jump on that fumble. I really think he never recovered from that. That was just
Career
such
defining moment. Career defining moment.
career exactly. And you see a lot of these players have those. Real quick to hit the chat. Jin just says that was an elbow drop. You can tell the Colts Pats hate is real. And Ginger bringing up something in the 05 season. He said McGinnis was a hoe pulling a fake injury at the goal line against us around 05.
As a non member of the rivalry, are you familiar with that one, Kyle?
I no, but I can imagine. Is that because you're out of timeouts, so you fake the injury, or is it to slow the offense down?
Yeah, so it was again that peak Brady Manning era when they would play every regular season as division winners, right? You know how the schedule works. And so those games basically became the de facto decider of who's going to have home field in the playoffs, right? So whether it was week 2 or week 14, those games, both teams circled because they knew they were going to take care of business everywhere else. Every player involved in that, every coach knew those games are going to decide which stadium the championship was played in. There's a big difference between the Dome playing outdoors in Foxborough, at Gillette in the playoffs,
especially for Manning.
I mean, for both teams, really.
But Manning was like terrible in cold weather.
And so that specific game was in the RCA Dome. I want to say it was 04. It was the 04 season. Manning leading a drive down to win the game, something like a 4-point lead, right? Which is the best. It's the best situation in football to me when an offense is down 4 with it's touchdown to win, right? Or you can't score a touchdown, you lose. It's down to that final drive. And in this situation, McGinnis did fake an injury to slow things down. He was holding his leg, pretending he cramped or whatever. And then the final play of the game, they were at the 1-yard line. The Colts were with that 4-point deficit. And they hand off to Edgerrin James. Willie McGinnis comes flying off the edge, tackles him in the backfield, stuffs him at the 1-yard line. Patriots win. And then McGinnis gets up and sprints down the field with a 1 in the air at full speed and reveals obviously that he's not injured. So it was a kind of an iconic moment of all of that, but it ended up leading to an AFC Championship game in Foxborough that the Pats won and went on to win their 3rd Super Bowl in 4 years. So I enjoyed that, Ginger Ninja. Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah, and it's probably the reason that they charge a timeout now.
And one other reminder on Willie McGinnis is that many forget he is the NFL's all-time leader in playoff sacks. With 16.
Yeah, that is something I wouldn't have won on an NFL trivia at all. I would have probably said God, probably the Green Bay Reggie White.
Or Bruce Smith or
Yeah.
But it's Willie.
Wow. All right, well, this is what Peter King said. He said, I've started to wonder, and I emphasize started, whether Bill Belichick, who needs 21 wins to break Don Shula's all-time record for coaching victories, will get them in New England. King buried deep in his 10 Things I Think section. He followed up with more thoughts on the Patriots-Bills game last season, and he said, I think Robert Kraft, who's 81, will enter his 30th year of the Patriots ownership in 2023. He's not saying that they're going to go into a rebuild deliberately, but he's been looking at the shit show on the Patriots offensive staff, wondering why Belichick left the offense so wanting this year. And anyway, he said, I can't see anything weird happening this year, the one that just ended. but I have my antenna up about the Patriots for 2023. So that kind of aligns pretty well with what I was thinking before I read this article. Is this something, just the overall climate of Patriots Nation or whatever you guys call yourself? Is this kind of the feel around what you're feeling and hearing? Is that Belichick? There has to be results this year.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a fire Belichick guy for a couple of years now.
Wow.
Over the course of the evolving dynasty, he started to suck up and control more and more and more power in the organization. So it started, you had Scott Pioli, who again is a really close friend of Bill. I think he's married to one of Bill's daughters. Scott Pioli was the guy basically playing GM. Bill started to consolidate more and more of that power over the years. And it got to the point where Bill's, at least the last 6-7 years, is the head of football operations, and everything goes through him. And something that's very interesting about the way that Bill Belichick runs the organization, it goes back to all of his roots and his experience on coaching staffs that spans over 40 years. He knows that the job of a head coach in the NFL is usually a very temporary one. And there's a lot of mistrust that's natural to that position when you're as well schooled in it as he is. So he's maintained a very kind of secretive culture around the team that I think is no surprise to any, third party. But he's very secretive about his coaching staff, about coaching turnover, about responsibilities within the organization. Who's the offensive coordinator? Who's the defensive coordinator? Where's the money really going? How much does Belichick make? How much do the
Why is
players
his
make?
son on staff?
Who manages the cap? Who manages this? Who does the draft? Who's in charge of scouting? Does he listen to his scouts, or does he end up overruling scouts and picking guys in the draft that he has a good connection with their college coach? And there's a track record there of a lot of mistakes that have really bit the roster in the ass. And no decision's been bigger than the one to run Brady out of town. And so you put the totality of that all together, and you look at the really, I say the performance of the football operation since Brady was driven out of it. And it's been nothing but average.
Yeah, drafting has been below average easily.
And I still think Bill Belichick is the best in-game coach in the league. And I think that there's still a pretty decent margin there. But you look at the teams that are having consistent success, save for this past season and injuries and everything with McVay. But you got McVay. You got Kyle Shanahan playing in conference championships every year. And you look across the league, Andy Reid, right? Another offensive minded guy. And obviously Mahomes is a huge part of that. But my point is, this formula of Führer Bill, like running the show, has been really a very average or below average operation. And this past season, the decision to use Patricia and Judge on offense, two guys that other teams are paying the salary for, who have no experience doing offense. I mean, it's not a second guess, because everybody was questioning it when it happened, and it ended up being just as bad as everybody expected. So that was a huge catastrophe. What gives me a little bit of hope right now, I do think Belichick's on the hot seat, and my view of this has evolved a little bit in the last few weeks, but it's basically, we just hired Bill O'Brien to be offensive coordinator. And the idea is that Bill O'Brien will basically be in charge of the offense the same way that McDaniels was, which means, he's not one of these coaches that puts his head in the play sheet. When the Patriots have been successful, he's had an effective defensive coordinator, an effective offensive coordinator, and he's been involved in helping and advising on all the critical situations around both sides of the ball. In the absence of that kind of leadership from the coaching staff, he's been spread too thin. And like a lot of the marginal things that the Patriots stood out for so long, because you had Brady and the offense, you had consistency, it allowed Belichick to spend his expertise on the margins. And as that evaporated, driving Brady out, Belichick's been spread too thin, and they've been really sucking on the margins. They were a terrible special teams team last year. I think they had 3 punts blocked. They allowed 3 kicker punt return touchdowns. And they lost games that they would have been in the playoffs despite this horrible offense, if they just had a reasonable operation around the coaching of it. So I'm hoping that adding Bill O'Brien to run the offense will allow Bill to get back into what he's so great at, which is managing the game, designing the game plans, and really focusing on those edge moments, those little marginal things that we see every week in the NFL is the difference between winning and losing.
Yeah. Wait, when you said Bill Belichick, as far as coaching, is one of the best in-game coaches of all time. I
The
don't
best.
remember what you. I was trying to find it while you were explaining, but I couldn't find it. But I don't know. You probably will remember. There was a game against the Broncos. It was in Denver. Denver didn't have a quarterback. They were down a quarterback. They were going with, I think, a third stringer, and Belichick purposely had the long snapper hit his own goalpost to do an intentional safety to punt the ball back to Denver and play field position. They got the ball back and scored and won the game. Do you remember? I'm assuming,
Totally.
yeah,
Absolutely. Right off the goalpost. I remember that one. And it was a Monday or a Sunday night game, primetime
yeah,
game. I want to say it was the year 2006, something around there.
yeah,
Um, and to me, that's a perfect example of when you have Brady, it allows Bill to do and think and operate in those little moments. And so what we've seen since Brady's been out of the organization is we've lost that edge, right? We've lost that ability to sort of weaponize Bill's specialties into these little nuances. And so that's a great example. And I think that goes back to all of it. I've seen so many. And the other thing, too, is growing up in New England, the time that I have as a fan of the Patriots, right? We've all become a little bit of like football snobs about what's good football, what's bad football, what's good coaching, what's bad coaching. And I watch these teams that have these awesome rosters and these elaborate offenses. And when it gets into crunch time, I still see stupid decisions happening all the time. For example, AFC Championship game, gotta have it. 3rd and 8. 3rd and 8, Joe Burrow dropping back. And his coach, Zach, whatever his name is, Zach Taylor,
Zach Taylor.
he's too buried in the playbook thinking about the pass routes. He's got freaking Chris Jones one-on-one with the tackle. And he just eats everybody alive and ruins the game and ends it. And so, number one, Brady was the
But
best ever at knowing that and knowing how to manage things and get the ball out quickly. But also, Belichick would never let an offensive scheme and an offensive plan in a crunch time moment and game like that come down to saying, let's trust our right tackle to block Chris Jones one-on-one with our season on the line. He would never let that shit happen. That's why guys like Dwight Freeney and a lot of the other elite Hall of Fame players the Patriots had to get through, they never wrecked games. And the reason they didn't is because of focusing on those
eh,
things and everything working
I'd say
together.
Von Miller, 2015 AFC Championship game.
That still came down to a chuck to Gronkowski in the back of the end zone that could have forced overtime, right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, they were there at the very end of it, but
That's a
I'd say
close
Von
to
Miller
wrecking the
was
game
a
thing. But,
yeah,
you kind of get my point, right? Like there was a plan
totally.
there. You mentioned Kittle, right? Kittle chipping, whoever it was last week, right? And like that's those kinds of little marginal things, they add up huge. And that's been the weakness of the team since Brady left. And that's been why I've been down on Bill. But now moving forward, um, I'm not the biggest guy about all these records and these lifetime achievement awards. I'm focused on championships and winning, and that's what I care about. So last year, before the season, before all the coaching BS, any honest Patriots fan would tell you this entire season's about Mac Jones's development. Huge fail, F- grade. This year, we're almost back to where we started. Now we have a real offensive coach. Now this year is all about Mac Jones's development and making the decision on whether or not to extend him on what's going to be an extremely costly franchise quarterback post-rookie deal extension. And today, if you ask me, I'd say no, don't pay Mac Jones. He hasn't proven it, but he hasn't really gotten a fair shot. So this year is a really critical year for Jones, for the offense, for Belichick. If this year's offense looks like last year's offense, Belichick could get fired.
Yeah, that's fair. I just the only thing I think is with all those intertwining things that you mentioned about his son. I mean, Belichick feels like more of a dictator. Like it doesn't seem like there's a healthy chain of command going on in New England at all. And I feel like however it ends, it's going to be really ugly. And we'll see what happens. How much power Bill really has with Robert Kraft getting older. It could be interesting.
But Kyle, on the flip side of that, like waving a wand and looking through rose-colored glasses, I could see it not ending ugly. Like I could see O'Brien bringing some stability to offense. I could see some real legitimate conversations going on about Belichick's succession plan. I could see Jones taking a huge stride this year and eliminating some of the dysfunction. I could see this year being a 10-11 win team that has a competitive playoff game or two. And I could see them building something again so that Bill has an opportunity to, win 10-11 games the next 2 years, beat Shula, and leave the Patriots in a better position than he met them in. And that's something that legacy-wise, he's always been very conscious of, going from that Parcells thing. He still has a little kink about him, about the way that Parcells left organizations, where he really wants to be on the better side of that. And there's still an opportunity to do that. I don't want to say I'm very skeptical, but I'm naturally very skeptical. In this scenario, I kind of see it 50-50. It could just suck and fizzle out in a really negative way. But I do see a light there where it's possible this is a competitive team that challenges Buffalo and gets back near and around the AFC Championship game between now and the end of Belichick, which I think is, in the best of times, 3 years from now, something like that.
Yeah, and my brother owns a bar in Miami, and it's kind of like a saying that you could apply to anything in life, but you always want to leave something better than you found it, like no matter what it is. And I didn't realize that was so important to Bill. That kind of does change some of the dynamics. Bill, welcome to the podcast. I see you in the chat here. He actually said, unless you're the Steelers, they keep head coaches until they wear out. Mike Tomlin has never had, and then Jinja. Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season. That's impressive as hell.
Don't
Very
disagree
impressive.
with that. Don't disagree with that one bit. Kudos to Tomlin, even though I think he's talking about in-game coaching and situational coaching and everything that I say is good about Bill. In a lot of scenarios, Tomlin's just in over his skis on that stuff. Not the tactician, but you can't knock his consistency, and that's a huge credit to him.
Yeah, and it's almost it's a good and a bad thing. I mean, it's like pick your poison. Would you rather be 10-7 or 9-8 every year and win one Super Bowl every 20 years, or have, like the Rams have like 10 terrible seasons and win a Super Bowl and just have these high peaks and these, big falls? People say, I talked to Rick about it, and he said, look, if we could just win one Super Bowl, I don't care if we're shit again. And I kind of used to say that too, but being a guy that hasn't been to the playoffs since Super Bowl 50, the longest team to ever miss the playoffs after winning a Super Bowl, I changed my mind. I would rather play even one playoff game. I'd rather have, meaningful football in December and January. And that's something that Mike Tomlin's been able to do, and Bill Belichick for the most part. And you said that you could see with your wand that there's a chance that the Patriots could win 10 or 11 games next season, and you said a playoff game or two. I'm not trying to like make you say they're going to go to two, but I do think we have to address the Mac Jones. So Mac Jones, obviously a really good year, a really bad year. He had 1,000 passing yards less. Let's see, he had 2,997
And
this year.
Kyle, I'm not a big stats guy. I think waving a wand here to simplify things. Back to the wands. Good rookie year, right? Shit, second year.
Yeah. So, but I feel like, does that mean something? Because I kind of do like stats, but I don't like just stats. I like to see stats and also combine them with like who is the offensive coordinator? What kind of weapons did they have? Is there a reason for the digression, or is this player not getting better? And across the board, this season was worse. No matter how you want to slice it up, it was worse in every statistical category.
They didn't throw a fourth quarter touchdown pass until that Raider game.
Yeah, and we know how that one ended.
But that was like week 16 or 15. I mean,
that's insane.
It was a disaster. It was ugly.
So what do you attribute Mac Jones's decline to, I guess, is what I'm saying. And do you wholeheartedly believe, or did you lose some confidence with what happened this year in his ability to continue to mature into? I'm not saying he's going to be Tom Brady because nobody really will ever be that probably, but will he be a serviceable quarterback that can lead you to a Super Bowl? I feel like that's all that matters. Can this guy win a Super Bowl at some point? If he can, we'll keep him. Like Rick said, oh, get rid of Daniel Jones. He said that last year. And I said, well, hold on. Now, before you do that, you got to remember how terrible the quarterback carousel is. When you get on that thing, you realize that things aren't better on the other side. The grass isn't greener. The grass is greener where you water it. And sometimes you just got to invest in what you have. What do you feel about Mac Jones, and where's his ceiling moving forward?
I'm glad you brought up Daniel Jones because you know who was involved in Daniel Jones's regression year?
Same,
Joe
same
Judge,
OC, Joe Judge.
who was a quarterbacks coach last year, who has no experience running quarterbacks and nothing but a
Look at that.
disaster, right? So, um, I believe Mac Jones can be a franchise quarterback. I do. I'm not super confident in that. This year is really the prove it year. But if you look at last year, it's not that complicated. What's the title of the guy that usually runs the offense? Offensive coordinator. They ran and they didn't have an offensive coordinator title, and they didn't have anybody with offensive coordinator experience. And the result was an uncoordinated offense. You had receivers running in the same spot. You could even see it on the shitty broadcast with the limited cameras. Don't get me started on the NFL and the cheapskates and the BS around the business. But you could see, all right, beyond the stupid attempted zone blocking running scheme that they never really implemented. They wasted weeks and weeks and weeks in preseason trying and failed. You could see receivers running their routes and the timing of their routes and the spacing of their routes, two guys being in the same place on critical 3rd and 4, 3rd and 6, got to have it plays in situations that win and lose games. And so the way that Jones handled it was less than great, and it didn't necessarily reflect well on him, and it gives me some serious doubts. But ultimately, the lack of coordination of the offense is what I give the majority of the blame to. And this year, hopefully, Bill O'Brien's leadership can bring a coordinated offense together, and we can see Jones return to form and hopefully be better than he was as a rookie. Give them the confidence to commit to him and not go back into the quarterback carousel. Having said all that, this guy Hooker from Tennessee who tore his knee up, I'd love to see the Pats take Hooker in the 3rd or 4th round, something like that, or a player like that, so that there's a QB in waiting situation where you can develop a project piece and have a backup plan if things don't go well. So that's where I'm at with Jones.
Yeah, and I don't know if you heard, but a story came out, and it was a real story. I hate saying story because it makes it sound like it could be real, it could be not. But Mac Jones was calling around asking for help with the offense, and apparently Belichick didn't like that. And on one hand, being a person that just went through an entire season with Russell Wilson having his own private quarterback coach and all of these other things that aren't necessary, I could see how, hey, let the outside be the outside. We're going to handle our business in the outside. Don't mix the worlds unless we're all going to sit at a table and talk together. So I understand that side of it, but at the same time, you can hardly get mad at a young quarterback that knows, hey, this is a broken system. My future's on the line. I'm going to be judged off of what I do this year. Like even myself talking about his digression and saying his stats, people around the world are doing that. He wants a fair shot at this. You know, it's probably his dream and he wants to do it, and it wasn't working. And he knew from playing in Alabama with Nick Saban what it takes probably to have a successful offense, and this isn't it. And he was trying to get help, and Belichick didn't like that. Like what's your opinion on that? And do you think that he was in the right trying to, exercise some resources outside the building?
Yeah, no, and Kyle, we had our first conversation today, right? So I don't know you extremely well, but I know that in my career away from podcasting, I've got a network of people that are mentors and experienced people that I trust, that I've been in the trenches with before, that have contributed to my development. And if I'm struggling in a professional setting, you're damn right I'm going to ask for advice, and I'm going to go to really I'm going to exhaust my resources to help my development, and with the end goal of helping my current team and helping what I'm trying to do. So I thought of it in that sense. I didn't think of it as such a betrayal effort. And to me, it speaks to Jones's commitment to really being the best player and the best teammate he can be.
Yeah.
One thing about Jones that I have unwavering confidence in is the guys in the room love him. His teammates really love him. His teammates are behind him. I think there were moments this year where he got into his fit. His nickname, I don't know if you know this on a national level, but locally, his nickname's McEnroe. Because he grew up playing tennis, and he's got a little bit of that sort of fit and fury to him. But I think at the end of the day, his intentions are true. The practices, especially at the NFL level, especially in a regime like Belichick's, that might be a major, major, major no-no. But I think it just speaks to the overall dysfunction, distrust, and lack of effectiveness on the offensive side of the Patriots last year, that Jones deserves some, he deserves some criticism for, without a doubt. However, I really ultimately go back to the football operation, and there's only one person that's in charge of that, and that's Bill Belichick. So that's pretty much where I'm at on that whole episode. But overall, I mean, it's, the cards are on the table. This is the make it or break it season.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. Here we got Bill's comment. He said, "My man, Kyle had my back and he didn't even know me back then." Oh, he's not. So Bill's a Giants fan, so he loves when we bring up Daniel Jones, and he's happy that I had Daniel Jones's back, because we're living in a time, Bill and Rusty, where you see these quarterbacks get drafted in dysfunction, and then they're supposed to produce, and then in 2 years they draft another one. And it's not a coincidence to me that quarterbacks that get drafted in better scenarios are better, right? Why was Denver, no matter who they drafted, they couldn't get it right for so long? I mean, yes, they're probably picking the wrong guys. That's part of it. But there's another part of it where who knows what Mitch Trubisky would have been if he was drafted in a better, Mike Tomlin. Look at God, I'm drawing a blank. Quarterback for the Steelers right now.
Kenny Pickett.
Kenny Pickett. Thank you. Look at, I mean, it's not flashy, but if you watch the Thursday night game that happened at the end of this, I think it was the last week of the season when he led his team on a touchdown drive to close the game. You saw that and you're like, this is a guy that can lead his team in the future. I have all my faith in Kenny Pickett. And look at that, drafted to a functional organization. And some of these guys, I just don't think they get a fair shot. And it's like the butterfly effect. It's really interesting to me to see, like, hey, maybe in another time, in another place, in another uniform, you would have been somebody special and never got that chance.
And I'm so glad you haven't used the Z word so far as we've been talking about Mac Jones's future, because I think there are a lot of fake football fans that don't really get it. That really went that really went nuts about, oh, Mac Jones sucks. Mac Jones. But you mentioned, right, when you pick a quarterback and you start to move in that direction and then you bail, it's more often than not, almost every time, you spiral into this musical chairs of quarterbacks, coaches, coordinators, quarterbacks, coaches, and it's a disaster. And so, as a Patriots fan, right, we've had just the most ridiculous run ever that'll never be replicated. And so we don't have a point of reference for that, but I try to stay pretty grounded. I try to look around the league, especially in this post-Brady era where we really are just 1 out of 32 again. Um, you know, let's not be so quick to shit on Mac Jones. Let's give him a chance with an operational offense. Let's see what it looks like this year. If he falls on his face and, he's short arming throws to the sideline, getting pick six, he's not figuring out how to take a sack and punt, he's fumbling, he's being careless with the ball, he's making the wrong reads. If that starts to happen, then all right, he's not the guy. We can move on. Let's not give him the farm in a contract, because that's what it's going to cost to take him. However, let's do everything in our power to make him successful, because we don't want to be one of those teams looking for a quarterback in the draft every year, because you could be looking for decades.
Yeah, and there's only a handful. And honestly, depending on what year you are, some of them get a little overrated just because there's not many options. And like I don't think Bryce Young is going to develop into a good quarterback because we've seen small guys take that role as a quarterback, but Bryce Young is like a toothpick, extremely skinny, really small. I don't think he's going to be able to stay healthy, but that's a whole nother sidebar. And I think overall, though, just as an outsider that just met you, Rusty, I think that you're looking at all this like extremely well. Not that that means anything coming from me, but I just think like I can't. There, if somebody wanted to debate you on anything you said, I think they would be hard pressed to argue with anything that you said because you got your heart into it, but you're also really logical about everything you said. And let's extend that to the cornerback position because the Patriots might have to address this, right? They're going to have some free agents happening this season, primarily Jonathan Jones. Um, him coming back makes sense, but if he wants to be paid like a true number one corner, I don't think it does. But he's definitely a piece that the Patriots can build off of if they can settle at the right dollar amount. And I put a list of the cornerbacks that are going to be free agents. James Bradbury came to mind from Philadelphia. He's the only player that earned a second team All Pro on this list. He had 3 picks in over 1,000 snaps. I know you don't like stats, but he he allowed a 46% completion percentage, which was fourth best in the league. And then there's some other names: Cam Sutton from Pittsburgh, Jay Muldean from Tampa, Patrick Peterson is one. He's a little older, but you saw that he still got ball left in him, and he could lead a young group potentially. I thought he looked good in Minnesota, especially how bad that defense was. I thought he was actually one of the bright spots. And I know he's old, but he had a good season. Jonathan Jones is actually on this list because he's a free agent. What do you think do you think it's more of a draft thing? Do you think they need to go out and get one of these free agents like a James Bradley or a Bradbury or a Patrick Peterson? What do you think that they have to do because their cornerback room's in trouble?
I think it's a good point. Their cornerback room is not strong. There are a lot of needs on the team right now, and the offseason's young. But if going a little bit back in the kind of time portal, and we talked a little bit about how the game's changed over the years, but those early teams, right, anchored by Ty Law. Ty Law ended up being hurt on that third Super Bowl. He didn't play in that postseason. They had to scrap things together, but they had a really, really experienced group, and obviously they had that guy wearing number 12 that is Superman. Then the Patriots went to 2 championships, 07 and 11, and played in a number of AFC championship games where they were bested, and they went a 10-year span without winning a championship. And one of the big hallmarks of those teams is they never had the guy at corner. Went out and got Aqib Talib, and that was almost good enough. I still have a huge problem with that Broncos championship game when they allowed Peyton Manning's noodle arm at that point in his career, and they didn't jam receivers at the line of scrimmage, and they allowed him to fire it off underneath. That's one of my – I don't want to even go down that rabbit hole, but my point is they got back into the championship mold when they brought in Revis, who's not my favorite person, but was a hell of a player. And, that season – started to kind of re-anchor them. They went on to win 3 championships in 5 years. And it's not because Revis was a cornerstone of all of that, but it was a dedication to understanding the balance of the team and having a balanced roster and having a balanced team. And so when I look at the current cornerback room, Jonathan Jones is a really good piece. He's really fast. He had the injury season. He missed the whole year last year and then came back, 2 years ago. Was back this year and forced into some scenarios and some matchups that just didn't play well to him. I think he's really good. I think he's a great slot guy. He's proven that slot position is really difficult and tough, and because the guys can go inside, outside. There's no boundary to guard against. My opinion is still evolving about whether or not in the moving forward NFL that you need a shutdown corner. Frankly, I'm not sure shutdown corners exist anymore. Jalen Ramsey. Well, let me just get the point out. Like, I love Surtain, right, and I love Humphrey, and there are a handful of guys that are really great, but like these wide receivers in like the passing game and the way that the offensive football is gone, you're going to play really good teams that have just ridiculous talent catching the ball. And so I think the answer is about pass rush. I think it's about pass rush and it's about scheme and not allowing quarterbacks to sit back there and throw it. And so I'm like, you asked about corners. And like in this era, I don't think a fix-it move is bringing in a big money corner. Like I'd love to have Bradbury. Don't get me wrong. I think that'd be great and huge. But I think it's more about depth in the secondary. There's some young corners who brought in that are promising. Marcus Jones has been, he played a little bit of offense. He was great on special teams, returning kicks. And he's shown a little bit of a spark. Again, smaller guy, not going to be that number one. There's another guy, Jack Jones, that they brought in from Arizona State. He was like a 3rd or 4th round pick. Former 5-star recruit, went to USC, got caught up in a botched, I forget if it was armed robbery or if it was like passed out in the Taco Bell drive-through thing. But he got kicked out of USC. He's got some character flaws, but he's been he showed a lot of promise this year and kind of lost his way. So those are 2 young players that have some promise, but I agree. I think they're 2 to 3 healthy bodies at that cornerback position from being in a good spot. And if that means going to free agency, great, but I think it needs to be supplemented to the draft. And I also think that this pass rush needs to continue to be invested in with Judon and keeping Uche around and continuing to kind of scheme up the pressure on quarterbacks, because I think moving forward, nobody can cover these wideouts anymore. You need to get pressure on the quarterback.
Okay. I could agree with so you're just saying like, yeah, cornerback's cool and all, but if you can get a good pass rush, they won't have the time. And you're going to get beat once in a while, no matter how shut down your corner is. You're just saying the pass rush is more important than having a shutdown corner. You're not saying that they don't really, because we play Devontae Adams twice a year, but we also with Surtain went on like 4-game stretches where it was like Surtain's given up 1 catch for 15 yards in the last 4 games, and you're like, well, if that's not shut down, I don't know what is. I mean, but then he had that 1 game against the Panthers where DJ Moore, he had a bad game. He just had a bad game, and that's why he was first team All Pro. I've seen firsthand. So like the it's funny though, because the Patriots, like you mentioned, they don't really do cornerbacks. Like you mentioned Ty Law and you said Darrell Revis and Aqib Talib, but there's not like, I think those are all journeymen, right? Because none of those guys besides Aqib Talib.
Well, two of the 3 are Hall of Famers. So I wouldn't say
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
journeymen.
I'm just saying, like, you didn't draft them. They're not homemade.
Right. Well, Ty
Yeah,
Law was, but
Ty
the
Law
other
was.
2, yeah.
And Champ Bailey wasn't drafted to Denver, but he was traded for pretty
Yeah.
early in his career. As far as I'm concerned, he's a Denver Bronco, and that's why he's in the Ring of Fame. But Denver is a place that's known for their cornerbacks, because most of our life we've at least had one, right? We had Champ Bailey, and when that was over, there was the no-fly zone, and they've always had solid
Yeah, you
cornerbacks.
had
So it's like,
Talib and Chris Harris, right? Yeah, that
yeah,
was a
Chris
good
Harris
unit.
Jr.
But you
And
also always had Von Miller in the pressure too. And so
yeah,
they're very complementary pieces, right? So that's all part
extremely.
of pass defense.
Yeah, extremely. I was thinking maybe that kind of goes into it. Like the expectation in Denver is that we're at least going to have one really good cornerback. Like, and it's just really fun to watch too. Like, just it's good television. Like when you got one corner, when Von Miller was playing, my eyes were locked on. I feel like everyone has one player that you really love that your eyes are just locked onto when the play's happening. And this year, it's Patrick Surtain. Like it's amazing to watch how quick he can, even when he gets beat, his ability to make up and just get back in, and his length, and it's
But that's
really
a
impressive.
top 5, top 10 pick, right? I mean, you got Surtain pretty high up there.
Yeah, he was really high up there. We drafted him. The Cowboys were going to, and that's why the Cowboys got Micah Parsons. So it
Yeah.
was really high up there. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to get. It's hard to get those guys. So let's move on to the running game, okay? Because you guys did, I would say, the highlight of your whole year from an outsider was the development of Ramondre Stevenson. Really quick, Jinja and Bill, just want to thank you guys for being in here, enjoying this. I'm going to hit some of these comments really quick. Jinja said, "Hey Rusty, the fake football fans you're talking about with the Z word were mostly New England fans, mass holes." That is true, because
I concur.
and then Bill said, But yeah, I jumped on the Purdy bandwagon to leave. Love the kid. Okay, so into the Purdy conversation. They're saying he might be back in under a year, getting a repair from the Texas Rangers doc. That would be good. I'm really curious. I'm going to be following that closely this offseason to see if they go with Purdy. I feel like he probably earned that, but Kyle Shanahan knows what he's doing. And he says, to your point, Kyle, just look at Eli for a decade. Even after winning Super Bowls, people were down on him. That is true. Like when you think of a Hall of Famer, a lot of people don't think of Eli Manning. And a lot of people would say why, and a lot of people would have answers. Like I feel like you can make kind of both sides. I never thought Eli Manning was an elite quarterback, but I felt like he got the job done. So why does it matter? I mean, what's your take on that?
Is Joe Flacco elite?
No, absolutely not. No.
But Joe Flacco was elite in 2 consecutive postseasons. Joe Flacco carried the Ravens right into Foxborough in 2011 and put the ball in Lee Evans' hands to win the game. They had a chance to tie it with a field goal and force overtime. But before that field goal attempt, he put the ball in Lee Evans' hands to win the game. And Lee Evans couldn't hold on to it. Sterling Moore, I think, stripped it away. And then Cundiff blew the kick, and the Patriots went on to lose to Eli Manning. But the next year, Flacco was perfect, and he won a championship with a championship-ready team. And so my point about all of that is I wanted to give a tip to my Ravens buddies about is Flacco elite. But this goes back to our earlier point about that quarterback carousel. And Jones is never going to be Mahomes. He's never going to be an MVP guy. But I do think he can be a functional, operational quarterback. And I believe that with a team around him, just like Eli had good teams around him. They had that great defensive front. They had a balanced run pass game. They had a lot of good players in that roster, and it was a well-coached team. Same with those Ravens teams. So my point is, let's go with that model. Let's try to have a good 1-53. I think Jones is good enough to win, but we'll see it this year.
Yeah, after you said that that catch that was dropped, I was going to say the worst play of my life was the 2012 AFC divisional round in Denver when Joe Flacco, 3rd and 14, backed up. We have a 7-point lead. Jacoby Jones and the famous Joe Flacco like going like this, and that was the one and only year that I didn't watch any more postseason football. I was that one hurt. Like to
I
this
respect the
day.
burn. I respect the spite.
Yeah, and they went on to win the Super Bowl. In a weird way, you feel better. You're like, well, we lost probably Hail Mary to the Super Bowl winning. Hey, we'll be in the Super Bowl next year. That's what that means to me. And we were.
And you got there, right?
Yeah, and got our asses completely kicked. All right. So let's talk about Ramondre Stevenson, because Ramondre Stevenson was a really big deal this year, but it seemed like the rest of the Patriots offense wasn't playing up to his level. And I did get some stuff in here. Don't worry. It's not stats. It's not pulling up. It doesn't matter. I just basically was going to talk about how Ramondre Stevenson had the Patriots had fewer than 100 rushing yards more times than any other team. And Ramondre Stevenson had, okay, now it's pulling up. I was like, okay, the team. Okay, so Ramondre Stevenson was responsible for 27% of the Patriots' yards. That's a significant amount. He 279 carries. That means nothing. But the Patriots went through a 6-game stretch. That's what I'm talking about in the middle of the season where they averaged fewer than 4 yards per carry. They didn't crack 100 rushing yards as a team in 9 games. They didn't block too well for Stevenson, who made 68.7% of his 1,040 yards after contact and averaged 3.4 yards after contact, which you could look at this 2 ways. One, Ramondre Stevenson has a very high ceiling, if they can do better. But the thing is no weapons, no real passing threat. Like you said, the mediocre zone scheme shit they were trying to do didn't work. And they just would stuff the box and stop Ramondre Stevenson. And he still got 1,000 yards. And I think there's a difference between having a good running game and having a good running back. And I think right now you guys have a good running back.
I concur. Stevenson, again, you mentioned some stats, and honestly, I suck at fantasy. I came in last place, and I get so much shit. And any of my buddies that listen to this might get some, jokes in my problem. But the running back position, right? So I don't want to shit on Ramondre because he's the man. He works his ass off. He had that crazy mental hiccup in that Raider game, but he plays so hard. He runs so hard. He's a bull to bring down. He's got great ball skills, but going back to like our conversation, it's all kind of a little bit circular and kind of tied into it. The game of football is changing year after year after year. The bell cow running back, the Eddie Georges, the Jamal Lewises, the Clinton Portises, like those guys don't exist anymore. You need to have a couple of guys in the backfield that can run the ball. You need to have a couple of guys that can catch the ball. And going to your point, right? You have a good running back. You don't have a good running game. I'll take a good running game over a good running back 15 times out of 10. And I want the investment this offseason to be in the offensive line. And I want to get a running back off the scrap heap late in the draft. Guy I really like is this Ibrahim, who played at Minnesota, who's projected to go like day 2, or sorry, formerly known as day 2, now known as day 3, but like 4th, 5th, 6th round. That kind of guy that can spell Ramondre. Like, I think Ramondre is going to be your money down short yardage guy. But the fact that he put up the numbers he put up and shared his share of the pie and the workload that he did, it speaks to all my prior points about an uncoordinated offense, about a bad plan. His yards after contact, they weren't even blocking well for him. So let's get a tackle in the first round of the draft. Let's look to free agency and trades to get another tackle. Let's invest in this offensive operation so that we're setting up Ramondre Stevenson and whoever else we bring in, because I think Damian Harris has probably played his last snap as a Patriot.
Really?
Well, just because contracts are up, and my opinion is if you give a running back a second contract, you're an idiot.
I'm with you on that.
It breaks my heart because Ramondre's given his blood and guts to this organization, and he's going into a contract year. And I don't want to see him run ragged and get hurt in week 12 because he's on pace for another 300 carry season. So, I don't want to necessarily, I'm not ready to re-sign him, tomorrow and spend all this money on running back. That's not what you do, but let's spend on the running game and let's organize the running game. So that's where I'm at with all of that. And hats off to Ramondre. I think he's a tremendous player, and the heart that he showed, he just seems like a great guy. He's one of the guys I really root for.
Yeah. When you said he needs somebody, you're looking for that balance, the quick, fast guy, the guy that catches. I thought of Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott. Like you got Zeke, who's going to be, and I think Ramondre Stevenson is playing better than Zeke. I don't think that's much of an argument, but the dual threat that they pose, and you saw the 49ers had that too when they brought in Christian McCaffrey.
So while we're talking about backfields and you're asking about the Patriots running game, my two big it's really three things I need them to address in the running back room. We need a spell. We need a spell to Ramondre. That is a slasher, right? A guy that carries the ball. This Ibrahim from Minnesota kind of fits that mold. A guy to just keep the running back fresh in the running game. We also need a fullback. We went away from the fullback this past year for no good reason. And obviously, you just riddled off a million reasons and stats why that was a disaster. It was a disaster. Let's get a fullback. Let's get a spell running back. And let's also get a pass catching back. Ramondre can do that, but it's not it's not the best use. There's a guy who played at Northwestern, last name Hull, who is, I just saw him in a couple of Big Ten games here locally. He's not super flashy. He's kind of like a Rex Burkhead type. He's just, he does
Peyton Hillis?
No. He's not like a big bruiser. I say Burkhead because he's great in the passing game. I think he can run routes almost in the slot. You can come out and create personnel.
Darren Sproles.
Somewhere between Sproles and Sproles is just so elite. I don't want to say that this kid's going to be a Sproles, but something like that, right? Where you can come out and the game on offense, right? It's about the scheme, yeah, but it's about the personnel groupings. How many different looks? How multiple can you be when you break the huddle and you have the personnel and you get to the line of scrimmage? Allow Mac Jones to use his mind. That's supposed to be his best characteristic. Use his mind to decide, looking at this front, looking at these personnel matchups. Do we want to run it down their throat because they're light and they have too many defensive backs on the field, or 210-pound linebackers and we want to mash them up? Or are they too bulky? Do we want to get a running back on the outside in a matchup with a linebacker that we can exploit? Patriots always had those guys. Shane Vereen, James White. Almost nobody's better than James White.
James White was great.
Danny Woodhead, Kevin Falk. they always had these guys, and they don't have that. So we need a pass catcher, we need a spell, and we need a fullback.
That is so true. It's something I didn't even think about, but the Patriots have always been known for that. They've always been known for having a guy like that. They the Patriots never had like a Tyreek. Well, they had Randy Moss that one year when he threw
No
50
championships.
touchdowns.
No championships.
Yeah, 16-0 though. But when I think of like the New England Patriots, I think of a bunch of white slot receivers, to be honest. I think of Edelman. I think of Wes Walker. I think of uh, starts with the A. I can't pronounce it right now. Amendola.
Danny Amendola, playoff Danny,
Amendola.
and not even playing the race card, right? Troy Brown, black dude, but played the exact same role. He was Brady's go-to guy in those early years. Dion Branch, right? Those kinds of
Yeah,
guys, like a multi, like it's having a diversity of skill sets and a diversity of options. What made like the Brady operation so effective was that it allowed Brady to make the right decisions because he had so many options to go to. He could exploit the mismatches. And I'm not saying Jones is Brady, but I think the path to success with a guy like Jones that's not Mahomes, that's not Burrow, that's not Fields, that doesn't have this like dynamic, like him factor. It's got to be a dynamic brain factor that finds a mismatch, that has like being multiple, right? They used to talk about being multiple and being able to get different matchups from your personnel groupings. There's been none of that the last few years since Brady left. And I'm hoping that, from the top of the organization right down to, Mac Jones making the calls and getting them in the right looks, that there's a return to that in offense in New England.
yeah. And real quick, just to hit this chat. Bill said, I had to be a Colts Bronco fan whenever we weren't playing them because Peyton was family. That just shows you how close the fan base is to Eli. So to 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 a Giants fan, Peyton was family, and I know that was reciprocal too for Colts and Broncos fans cheering for the Giants, especially when you saw Peyton on the bus ride to the airport or whatever after a game. If his son or if his brother was playing Sunday Night Football, he would like request the game so he could watch his brother play, and it's just cool. And if you saw our episode last week, we talked a little bit about the mother of the Kelsey mother flipping the coin. That I think that would be really cool. Honestly, I'm one of the people that bought into it because me and my brother are really close. I couldn't imagine playing with him in a Super Bowl. It's like a dream come true, and it's also like a super heartwarming story. But that is that was just I just brought that up because of this comment, Bill.
No, my brother's probably my best friend too. But if he and I were in a Super Bowl on opposite sides of the field, I think that we'd probably both get ejected.
Yeah, and you probably would both not want your mom to flip the coin. All right. So that was kind of my Patriot questions. Now I don't have anything written down here, but I'm just gonna ask you some questions about the league here. About the Super Bowl, and then we're also going into our NFL awards. I'll start with that. So let's see. There's Coach of the Year, there's Rookie of the Year, there's MVP. Let's just hit those three. So who's your Coach of the Year? Mine's Kyle Shanahan. I'll just put that out there.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. I think Shanahan, he's, Purdy, right? Mr. Relevant. That's just purely unbelievable to be able to plug in a player at that position. And it's like, it goes back to, and I think Kyle Shanahan, very good coach. And, he's also, he loves himself. Nobody loves you. You want to know how good of a coach Kyle Shanahan is? Just ask him. And so I think that this like Purdy event sort of is reinforcing his belief that it's not the quarterback, it's the system. But yeah, that's sort of a different tangent. I think he's a great candidate for that. I would probably give it to Dayball because of the team overachieving and the way that those guys played for him and what they got out of Daniel Jones. And I don't think anybody expected the Giants to win more than 6 or 7 games. And the fact that they were competitive all year, won a lot of close games. Obviously they got stomped by the Eagles 3 times, but I don't think that bashes it. I would give it to Dayball for turning things around, and I just think he deserves a ton of credit for bringing a culture change that often doesn't yield results and being able to do both of those in his first year.
Yeah, no, I agree, and so does the chat. Bill, he's saying Shanahan with all those weapons, LOL. But it's not like you don't already know my answer. Dabble for Bill, of course, as a Giants fan. It's not about the weapons to me because I had God. By the end of this, you're really gonna hate me because I know how much you hate stats.
But here's my
But
other thing. While you're looking at the stats, my other thing too,
yeah,
like to Bill's point about Shanahan, like that's a sick roster. That's the best defense in the league, right? So
yeah,
like I do think Shanahan deserves a ton of credit, but when it comes to coach of the year, I think it's always about kind of doing more with less, unless there's some albatross team that just dominates. And that's why I go Dayball there. It's because that roster is so strong. I think they've done such a good job in the whole organization in San Francisco. But kudos to Shanahan. I'd probably give him runner up, but I'd go Dayball there.
yeah, and this is what I wrote about the weapons. This was something I wrote like 6 weeks ago. It says San Francisco has weapons, but don't lose sight of this. The 49ers are 42-19 in games started by Jimmy Garoppolo, including the postseason. They're 9-29 when others like Trey Lance, Nick Mullins, C.J. Beathard, and Brian Hoyer have started. So my point was kind of that. Look, they have a lot of weapons, and I understand that, but Kyle Shanahan's ability to simplify the offense for uh, not just Mr. Unlimited himself, but going into the season with the Trey Lance and the Jimmy Garoppolo and juggling that and getting Jimmy to stay and getting Lance to go out and then getting Jimmy to just come in and be happy to play. And then with him going out and then Purdy comes in, it's like, you know what? I think if it was almost any other quarterback besides Kyle Shanahan, this would fail. And that was my kind of reason for going that way. It was like I understand, and I'm right there. Like if Dabble wins, I won't be like, oh, Shanahan should have won.
Can
It's
I
just one of those where it's like pick whoever you want.
So I respect the Shanahan pick, but let me just throw this one dagger in his back before we turn the page on the topic.
Yeah.
I, I think Kyle Shanahan's proven everything that he can prove up until his ability to win the big games. And I think the reason that his teams struggle in the big games is because he's so obsessed with himself and he's so obsessed with his scheme and he's so obsessed with his play sheets and his offense and the elaborate things that they do. You get into crunch time and he's so buried in the play sheet that he loses track of core situations. They were in that game. They were in that game against the Eagles, right? Down to Josh Johnson, right? And there's a situation there. I think it's a 14-7 game. There's a minute 40 left before half, and
Yes.
they're about to get the ball. And Shanahan is stuck in his play sheet thinking about what kind of thing he's going to draw up so that Johnson can just drop the ball and let his players play and let his scheme be the genius. He's losing track of the big picture, which is what I think Belichick's so good at doing when he's got the right coaching structure around him, which is take a deep breath. We're in this game. We're down 7. Let's manage the clock. Let's get to halftime and let's play the second half of football and stay alive. Instead, Shanahan's out there running a spread with a guy that hasn't gotten a single rep. He probably joined the team about 4 or 5 weeks ago. He's been on 15 different NFL teams over 12 years, right? He's not the guy. So let's just take a fucking deep breath and let's get to halftime and let's let our league leading defense keep us in the game. Give us a chance to maybe win on a mistake that the Eagles make. Like coaches don't win games, they lose them, right? That's like an old Belichick maxim. And I think in that situation, he lost the game for his team. I'm not saying they would have beat the Eagles, but I'm saying the formula, like the game script, once Purdy was done, the game script for them to win is figuring out a way to run the ball, hanging around on defense, and winning a big splash turnover play somewhere in the game. Doesn't have to be you and your genius offense, Kyle. And I just think he gets so caught up in that, and that's why they lose the big ones. And a lot of people forget he was the OC on that Atlanta team that blew the 28-3 lead. So
Yeah.
again, just he's got a lot of experience doing that. And so I like coach of the year, great, regular season, great. But I think Kyle Shanahan's legacy will be his ability to either grow or not grow beyond what he is today, which is a very smart offensive coach.
Well, first off, I totally agree with you because when we were live streaming that game, I said when the ball was being kicked off to the 49ers, like, let's just get to halftime. We don't got to do anything. Like, don't go out. It's Josh Johnson. Like, you're not going to go down and drive and kick a field goal and feel good about yourself. You will feel good about yourself if you get to halftime and you're down 7. That's how you can feel good about yourself. And last week when they played the Cowboys, they got the ball in that same scenario and they decided to run the clock all the way out and then try to convert the third down. So if they didn't get it, they would give the Cowboys no time to get a drive of their own. So they're conservative with Brock Purdy the week before, but then with Josh Johnson, they're going to let it all air out. I don't get it. I didn't understand it either. But I will say to the system stuff, Kyle Shanahan, I think that's why Brock Purdy thrives so much, is because it's hard to get Trey Lance to just do the system stuff when he wants to make plays with his leg and do, extend the plays. Now it's like, okay, so the play
Stay
didn't
on
work.
schedule, right? Stay on
Yeah.
schedule, they say, right? The timing of the scheme and all the bullshit, right?
Yeah. So
Plug
I
in.
think I think Brock Purdy was perfect for that because he was like, look, I'm a young guy. I'm just going to do whatever you tell me to do. And it showed like Kyle Shanahan knows what he's doing, but I do think you have to have those moments where you're not a robot, right? You have to have a human side of you that's like, okay, let's think about this practically. And yeah, you're right. He didn't have the ability to do that in a big game, and it was really shocking because I just watched him do it the week before. And then Bill said, he said, I do see those points. They're valid on Shanahan. Coaches don't win games, they lose them. Not running beast mode in the Super Bowl against
The Malcolm Butler. Yep.
yeah, that is wow. I didn't even realize you're a Patriots fan. So I mean, you must love that. But man, we could go in a whole thing about that. Let's go to the offensive player of the year. So not the MVP, just offensive player of the year. I think it's got to be
Jefferson.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not much more to say. I mean,
I agree. MVP.
MVP. I mean,
I got Jalen Hurts. Just put that out there.
yeah, my problem with choosing Hurts is they didn't play every game. So
I know, but I don't think
yeah.
it
No, I mean,
affected
I
the
think
team.
yeah, I mean, I think that's a valid pick. To be honest, I'm not big on these kinds of regular season award stuff. I'll just say Mahomes to be opposite, and that sets up a Super Bowl conversation, perhaps.
Yeah, no, it does, and it's funny because me and Rick, we always say like we're not gonna be like we're not Sports Center, we're not ESPN. We don't set up anything. We just argue with each other, or we agree. I would say 90% of the time, me and Rick agree, and we don't like purposely take opposite sides or anything like that. But this is one we naturally disagreed on. He was like, no, Mahomes, the numbers, and I was like, you just can't underestimate what Jalen Hurts has done. Like Sirianni is not the guy that has transformed the culture of the Eagles. It's Jalen Hurts. And
I
Jalen Hurts,
I don't. Well,
even Sirianni agrees. I mean, they asked him about that. Like
yeah,
he said in the NFC
he's a leader.
Championship,
He's a leader, right? And he leads, and
but he
that's what
said
they
he's just
need.
along for the ride. That's what Sirianni said. He's like, look, these
Yeah,
guys are amazing. I'm just kind of along for the ride. And I really think when you look at Jalen Hurts, I thought he was slept on in the offseason.
yeah.
That's why I picked in our preseason. I said the Eagles are going to be very good and Jalen Hurts will be an MVP candidate. And everyone was shocked. And I don't know why, because the media wasn't covering him like they cover Patrick Mahomes. I don't know.
Yeah, I did actually catch your guys' media debate about the media coverage and this and that, and I think it's just it's a difference. I think in how we kind of cover and think about the league. It's like MVP. It's like who's the player that their team would have been most screwed without. You had that great drive from Chad Henne when Mahomes hurt his ankle that says, oh, maybe they could have been the Brock Purdy's, right? If Mahomes went down.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
But like realistically speaking, like I think it's kind of splitting hairs, and I'm not that into it because you look at MVPs and most MVPs end up losing the Super Bowl or losing at some point along the way. There were a million years when Peyton Manning was the MVP. I'm not going to fight you on that, but who do I want in the big spot? Is I want the team and the other alternatives that end up breaking through. So I think it's just a kind of a difference in how we look at this, but I don't know. I don't have a lot of passion to debate on MVP, to be honest with you.
Well, Bill makes up a good point. He said most important to the team, Tua, because without him, they collapse. But I get you as well as Minshew. That I think there could be a lot of people that are up, but I do think as far as like the league's concerned, usually the guy that wins it, if you don't win a playoff game, you have to be a number one seed or something of that nature. Um, but I agree with that. Most valuable to their team is what the award should be. It shouldn't be the most popular. It should be like, hey, what's the domino that if that falls, the whole franchise is screwed? And to me,
And my
I don't.
thing, I get your point with Hurts, right? He took them
Yeah,
from being what would probably be a 10-7, 9 and
and
8 team
yeah, and
to
Minshew
being the
went
wagon that
0-3.
they've been, But with Mahomes, it's like, well, they stripped away Tyreek Hill. So now he's got this diversity of options. I was talking about the Brady years where you had a lot of guys that could do a little thing, but none of them were the big studs. He's got Kelsey, which it still shocks me. No teams decide to shut down Travis Kelsey. I don't get that. But like, I just think he did. Yeah, I think his performances consistently and just like doing more with less this year. Because I just think the world of what Tyreek Hill does on the football field. I want to stress that on the football field. Um, he's so dynamic, and you strip that away from everything that they've known there, and the fact that they were still able to be successful. I think it all goes back to Mahomes.
Yeah, yeah, I think you can make an argument CMC deserves to be in the conversation. I think the Niners were what were they 3-4 or 4-3 when he got traded and they never lost until last Sunday. And they were definitely a totally different team. That was the trade of the year. That was one of those trades where you look at it and you're like, what? He got traded for a third and a couple of second day picks. It was like, why?
I've got a well, because he's a running back and he's got a big contract. But I get it. He's kind of more like an everything guy, right? He's
Yeah.
more like Debo
He's
Samuel
different.
than he is like Ramondre Stevenson, right?
Yeah.
Um, but no, I had a thought there, but I lost it.
Well, it'll probably come back because I'm going to ask you now. We talked about them too. Who do you have winning the Super Bowl? I'm gonna reserve my pick for Rick. I know he would hate it if I told everybody without him
Sure.
here, but I would love to hear what you have to say about this game that I think is going to be, I would say, a high scoring Super Bowl if I had to make a guess.
So you're betting me over. Okay. I put a bet in today, Eagles by 14 and by 14. I think it's going to be a blowout. I think the Eagles are going to be, I think they're going to beat this shit out of Mahomes. I don't think I don't think that Chiefs offensive line can hang with that Philly front. I think that Philly is going to be able to not let Travis Kelsey bail them out on every 3rd and 6, 3rd and 4. I think that Mahomes is limited mobility with the ankle, and obviously he's still unbelievable. And like, that's not like he's going to be bad, but like I've seen it. I've seen it with the best ever. Like when Brady's in a position where the rest of the team's getting their asses kicked, like he can't save you. And I think that that's what's going to happen on Sunday. I've got, AJ Brown, 2 touchdowns and an Eagles win. I don't think anybody in that Chiefs secondary can cover him. I think there's just too many one-on-one mismatches for the Eagles that the Chiefs don't have. I think that the Eagles, even if things don't go great in the air, they can go back to the run. And I think that they can probably run on this front. I think the Eagles are going to be smart enough not to let Chris Jones wreck this game like the Bengals let him wreck the AFC Championship. I just think that the Eagles are going to apply pressure and be all over Mahomes in ways that are really going to suffocate that offense. And I look at the other side and have tremendous respect for Spagnuolo, but I just don't think they have the horses. And I really trust and believe in that Eagles offensive line. And it's the offensive line getting Hurts involved in the run game, the multitude of weapons, and then you combine that with the way that their defense gets after the quarterback. I see every edge but quarterback. I see Eagles. And I see the healthiest we're going to have seen Jalen Hurts in a while. And this is the last game of the year, right? You're not saving it for anything. So getting him involved running, I just don't think I don't think that Kansas City is going to be able to stop the Eagles. And the Eagles are going to be beating the hell out of Patrick.
Yeah, like I said, I'll just add to some of the matchup stuff. The Eagles had the best passing defense in the league, and they're the only team that their front four has 10 plus sacks each player, which means they got a bunch of dogs up front that are going to be winning at the line of scrimmage. And then on the flip
Sweat,
side,
Cox, Riddick, their
yeah,
linebackers can run, their secondary can cover. I mean, that's tough.
yeah, it's gonna be and then on the other side, the Chiefs defense is historically bad right now. They're ranked last in red zone, 31st in passing yards. Like they are so bad defensively, but they pulled together 2 games in a row where they held their opponent to 20 points. That counts for something. Um,
But
even,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Kyle.
no, I was just gonna say that counts for something because it's the Bengals, and I do think they could have done some things better. But Jacksonville and the Bengals, 20 points, that's not bad. But they're about to play. I just think the Eagles are a different. I'm not trying to give my pick away, but I do think the Eagles are a different animal. Um, and look, I don't think that there's going to be much of a debate with this going forward with people, but you got to. I'll leave this one window open here. Is that you said it yourself? I think they have the edge in every single area besides the quarterback. Well, that counts for something too for the Chiefs. And I do think the guy that touches the ball every offensive play, we've seen people will themselves to victory, and we know the Chiefs can rise to the occasion. We've never seen Jalen Hurts play in a Super Bowl. That's something that we haven't seen yet.
But
And those are
so with Hertz, who's not played in the Super Bowl, but both rosters still have a lot of guys that have played in the Super Bowl, right? So I think there's sort of a shiny new, like being in the first Super Bowl and having a roster of guys that haven't been there is a huge disadvantage. It's a different game emotionally. The way it draws out, how long it is, how long halftime is. Halftime in the regular season and all the way through the championships is 12 minutes. Halftime in the Super Bowl is 40. There's all kinds of fireworks inside the building. You come out to start the second half, and it's hotter in the building than it was at the end of the
smoky.
first half. No, seriously, and like these are real things, and like fatigue factors in. You can be too hyped up, and you can fade late. There are a lot of kind of elements there on the margins. I just don't think we're going to get in there, and I also think that in key situations, I still don't have faith in Andy Reid. He's obviously a tremendous offensive coach and all of that stuff. But the same things I was saying about Shanahan getting caught in his play sheet, I think Reid falls for that too. And he's obviously got Mahomes to bail him out and to make the best out of everything. And it's a really dynamic duo. But I think at the end of the day, Reid is going to get a little sort of scheme happy when he needs a score. I think that's going to open up doors for guys getting more pressure because Reid doesn't want to leave an extra guy in to block because he's so excited about this exotic route combination that he drew up, in the 2 weeks that they had to prepare. So that's basically where I'm at.
Yeah, and Jinja, before I close out here, I just want to thank you guys for being in here. And he says, so Jinja, real quick before I hit that, he says Chiefs by 6. And then he says everybody but quarterback, but you have Hurts as your MVP. I do think that you can have a lot of talented players on a team and it not translate into wins. And I do think Jalen Hurts is kind of the walking coach's son cliche, not overlooking opponent. They asked him when he was 7-0, how do you feel about being 7-0? He's like, no one loved us last year, so I don't want him to love us when we're 7-0. And he just has this like uncontentness with winning week in and week out. Next opponent, he doesn't overlook anybody. All the stuff you want to see out of a quarterback, Jalen Hurts embodies, and I do think you can't put a price tag on that. And I think what the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes, like they know who they are as an organization. They've dominated the NFL. The Eagles are kind of they
They've
tapped into
they've dominated the AFC.
They've dominated the AFC. That is fact. Maybe not the NFL, but what Jalen Hurts did for the Eagles is, I think, something similar that Mahomes did. I mean, and we'll find out what happens here, but I just don't think just because Hurts has a better all around team and both teams are still in the Super Bowl, because I also don't even think the best team in the AFC made it to the Super Bowl. So, I mean, there's that. Um, so
So
I would much rather saw the Bengals in this game, to be honest.
I agree with you. I've got a quick shout out for Ginger Ninja. I mean, what a handle. I mean, that's a great alias. Ginger Ninja. It looks like he's a ginger himself. So I appreciate it. Now to his point, right? Every edge quarterback, but you have Hurts as your MVP. There's a difference between saying Hurts should win MVP and saying Hurts is a better player than Mahomes, right? MVP is not who's the best player. It's who was the most, whatever. And it looks at their season retrospectively. So I think anybody who says anybody at quarterback's better than Mahomes is either very biased or an idiot. And then the other point too on this, just to wrap it up, is Kansas City had chances to choke out the Bengals and they didn't, right? They gave Burrow chance after chance after chance to go win that game. They almost did. They let Jacksonville hang around, right? Until they fumble flopped down on the goal line. That could have been a really tight game. Those are both at home. Those are at Arrowhead. Now we're at a neutral site. You got a bigger, badder team that's deeper. And that's pretty much where I'm at there, Kyle.
Yeah, it'll be fun to watch. Rusty, is really good to meet you. I hope we have you back on. I had a good time. Did you enjoy it?
Likewise. Yeah, man. Great host. Thanks for having me on. I've enjoyed the podcast from as I've listened throughout the season. And I mean, let's keep it in the Star Six family. We're running the Slot Shot podcast, a hockey podcast. And that's all been going very well. But I'm available to you and to Rick. Whenever you guys need me, just let me know. If it works, it works. And I'd love the opportunity to come back on if you'll have me.
Yeah, no, we definitely will. And for you guys listening and people that are going to listen in the future, once we end the live stream, follow us at Star Six Media. Go ahead and subscribe. Tell your friends about the channel, your coworkers, your family. If you guys are enjoying it, maybe they'll enjoy it too. And you can follow me at Twitter at FTBLONLYPODCAST only, or football only podcast. And then follow Rick at And Now Rick, ANDNOWRICK. You got a Twitter handle, Rusty?
Yeah, my Twitter handle is Rusty Pedroia. Pedroia like Dustin Pedroia, Pedroia. Rusty like Rusty. So at Rusty Pedroia, and you can find me on the Slot Shot podcast and within the Star Six Media family. I think it's all running on all the socials. So,
All right, man. Well, it's been a pleasure, and I'll see you next time.
likewise, buddy. Thanks. Enjoy the
Yep,
game.
absolutely. See ya.